My name is Daniel Gerson of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, and I lead our work on public employment and management, which is supported by a working party comprised of 36 OECD member countries and a few partner countries like Costa Rica. We aim to help governments understand and shape the changing nature of work in the public sector and ensure that they build value for society through a skilled, committed, and trusted public workforce. Let me start by thanking you for inviting me to contribute to your Public Employment Forum. I'm very glad to see that Costa Rica is prioritizing the need to ensure that your public sector workforce is ready and able to tackle the policy challenges of the 21st century. This is also a high priority for our OECD member countries. We talk a lot at the OECD about how the future of work will transform the public sector, how new opportunities are created by new technologies. But to take full advantage, we need to ensure our public services are able to adapt and make the most of these new opportunities for efficiency and improved service delivery. After all, let us not forget that public organizations are made up of people. While the size of government workforces varies across country, on average in the OECD, general government employment makes up nearly 20% of total employment. And this doesn't come cheap. On average, compensation spending accounts for about 9% of countries' GDP and 20% of total expenditures. And in Costa Rica, it's even higher. So we need to make sure that we're getting the most of these huge investments for the sake of our economies, public finances, and our public services. Since 2014, I have been working with Costa Rica through our public governance review and our accession process for joining the OECD. And I've had the opportunity to learn more about Costa Rica's public administration, including its public employment challenges and some of the reforms that are currently being considered and discussed. One of the key challenges highlighted by us and others is the high level of fragmentation and pay complexity across many public employment regimes in Costa Rica. Therefore, we recognize that reform to the public employment law is an important step which brings Costa Rica closer to the principles laid out in our recently adopted recommendation on public service leadership and capability. This recommendation was created by the working party I run and representation from all OECD countries. It brings forward 14 principles that create a new international standard for a fit-for-purpose public employment regime. And you can find this recommendation in Spanish on our website. These principles set out the main priorities for civil service regimes, including ensuring the right foundational values are in place, that they are able to bring in or develop the needed skills, and that mechanisms for flexibility are built in to ensure government agility and responsiveness, which of course is increasingly important as we confront uncertain futures. Our recommendation provides some important goalposts to think about as you undertake your reforms. Regardless of how it's ultimately structured, the public employment regime should be comprehensive, considering different aspects of the broader employment life cycle. It should ideally be designed to attract needed talent from the labor market, to ensure recruitment and promotion decisions are based on merit and the principles of transparency, fairness, and inclusion. It should ensure employees are motivated and engaged to perform at their best throughout their career. And it should also establish a strong pipeline to groom the leaders of tomorrow. And this means ensuring that the upper tiers of management have their own rules in place that ensure not just a competitive salary package, but also professionalized procedures for selection, performance regimes, for results and accountability, and specialized learning and development opportunities. In order to be appropriately operationalized, these principles also need to respect the specificities of different public professions and branches of government. Many countries have, for example, different regimes in place for teachers, police, judges, military, and nurses. Recruitment, contractual terms and conditions like pay scales, and even disciplinary measures are handled differently under these regimes, recognizing that they require different kinds of skills, motivation, and protections. Imagine, for example, if the disciplinary mechanisms for police were the same as for nurses. Internal investigations of potential misconduct need to follow different procedures. Of course, these regimes, while separate, need to still respect the basic principles of transparency and have adequate oversight mechanisms in place. Likewise, state-owned enterprises usually have their own employment regimes in place. The terms and conditions of these employees are different, and they are not considered civil servants in many OECD countries. Depending on the administrative structure of the state, different levels of government may have their own regimes for their public employees. This is the case in most federal and quasi-federal countries, such as Canada, where I come from. In more centralized countries, such as France, where I live, civil servants fall under one of three different legal regimes. There's a different law in place for the national, territorial, and the hospital civil servants. And in this case, for example, teachers and many of the police officers are both governed by the same law at national level. However, there are specific provisions in the law which apply separately to each to be able to provide the needed specificities. So there are different sub-regimes, if you will. Going forward in your reforms, the important thing to remember is that some degree of coherence is important to address the high levels of fragmentation and inefficiencies and ensure that the same jobs receive the same fair pay. But a one-size-fits-all solution cannot be applied to all the jobs in the public sector. And a reasonable number of public employment regimes or sub-regimes can coexist, all the while ensuring each reflects the fundamental principles and values of a modern-day public sector. I hope these points resonate with your discussions today, and I look forward to hearing about the outcomes of this day. Finally, in closing, the OECD is always ready to support the government of Costa Rica to improve its public administration systems, and I look forward to working on this with you in the near future. Please don't hesitate to contact me for further information. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute.